back on bits again. I've heard this. Remember back when I was younger and first starting out and training that they would, especially when you do snaffle bit or we're transitioning from snaffle into a bridle. A lot of people they'd start to get a little heavy in the snaffle bit, or they're getting kind of a little heavy on your horse's mouth is getting a little heavy on your hands, and so you would go with a harsher bit or a heavier bit or some more leverage or whatever to make them get a little bit lighter, and then you'd switch it right before you go and show. What you really should be doing is you should be teaching your horse to be consistent in getting off your hands, and that's by aiding with your legs. But one of the things you can do to kind of help your horse get a little bit lighter is sometimes they'll get a little bit heavier and they're getting a little pushy, and oftentimes because you're in their mouth a little bit too much. But sometimes that's not easy to get around, especially if you have little kids riding and stuff. Kids, as they're learning, they're making mistakes. So one of the things that we can do is, instead of changing bits, I don't want to change what's their cue, right? Their cue is the mouth and what's happening in their mouth. So if I have a bit that I'm using, and I'm using a regular cue, a regular bit, and this is what's constant in their mouth, instead of changing a bit, I can change the curb strap, right? So if I'm wanting them to be, I can be working them regularly, and I work them regularly in a leather curb strap, and I can change out between that leather curb strap and go to a chain, right? And I can go to a bigger, heavier chain. What I'm looking for whenever I'm going to different chains is I'm looking for an uneven surface, right? So what makes this have a little bit more bite is I have a little bit more, less surface area. If it was real flat, like you have some of the chains that have two chains and they're real flat and they're smooth, well, the more contact, the softer it is. This one has kind of bigger, higher valleys and mountains in the middle, so it's like got a bigger ridge to it. Well, that's a little more uneven surface to come in contact with the chin. And if you really think about it, there's a lot of flesh in the mouth, right? So if there's a lot of flesh in the mouth, there's a lot of cushion, there's a lot of forgiveness in that inside the mouth. But when we look at the curb, what most people go and neglect is the fact that that curb has nothing but a mandibular bone, that big jawbone, and skin. So like you ever get and like bumped your head on something, that's just skull and there's no flesh, right? It's just skull and skin, and that really, really hurts, right? And if I get punched in this arm, the same thing, it's not quite the same. It's the same thing with your horse's chin. That chin or where the chin strap, whenever I go to create leverage with my bridle, by pulling back on the reins, the first thing that comes in contact is the curb, right? So I can adjust the bite, I can adjust the leverage by loosening that curb, by using a leather curb, a softer leather curb, or I can go to a little bit nicer chain, or I can go to a little bit heavier chain, and at all of those adjustments, it doesn't change the cues in his mouth, right? And it can create, you're still going to come in with the leverage. So something to keep in mind, right? I can keep the same bit and buy 3 different types of curb straps and adjust those before I go and show, and it doesn't change everything that I'm doing. And it's a little bit less money. You're only keeping one head stall, one bit, and same set of reins, same everything else. You're just getting 3 different curb straps. Okay, so on that same subject of curb strap, and that's in a training idea, I would go from a leather strap, and then I could go with a little bit tougher curb, right? Because I may be moving, asking for more or whatever. I want my horse to be softer. Well, the reverse works also if you're letting your kid ride your horse. So you've been you're riding your horse, you use a curb chain and you're riding around, but your kid or your student may have a little faster hands, getting a little too quick with your hands, getting a little too grabby. Well, the first thing goes in is a curb. So if I want to give a little forgiveness for their hands, I can go to a leather curb strap. So I can change that out and use it in reverse to kind of help my horse out. With one of my kids being a little too fast with their hands, or a student being too fast with their hands, I can kind of slow it down, give it a little more cushion to my horse. So keep that in mind. We can use that not only in one direction, we can use it the other direction too, right? We can help our horse's mouth out and his jaw out a little bit because we are putting a kid on or something like that, and make it a little bit more forgiving.